Okay, thank you. Hi, everyone. I'm Christian. I'm a little nervous. I got butterflies in my stomach, but haha. It's been a very inspirational couple days. I'm really pleased to be here with you all. Can you hear me okay? Sound good? Okay. So I'd like to introduce you to some of the lesser known butterflies of Colorado. Let's get into it. A little bit about myself. My favorite picture here is when I think that was my first communion, and that's my very, very famous bird nest collection. That's what I started as a little kid. I, for some reason, got into bird nests, and then eventually decided, hey, maybe I should figure out what birds go with the nest, and that led into birds and into wildlife, and here I am. I also have that's my Colorado iNaturalist map up there. I had a big milestone this year of my 10,000th observation on iNaturalist, so thank you. I am a field ecologist, so I'm here in the city of Boulder, out in the field quite a lot, taking pictures of pretty much everything. And I'm also, let's see, you can read my bio there, but I'm from Rhode Island. I'm a swamp Yankee. I wanted to throw that in there, swampa. But I've been out here in Colorado for about 18 years. So into the butterflies. So here's a moth. This is the latest and greatest species in Colorado. It's called Coloradans frigida, and I was involved in a bit tertially, but kindly the real finders of it. We all published a paper on describing this new species that was found down in Douglas County a couple years ago. And it's super cool. It has brachypterous females, so they are flightless. You can see the female up at your right. So really tiny wings, proto-wings. They're not pollinators, they're root feeders on the sand dropseed, which is a native grass. It grows in sandy areas, and they fly in the fall, so they're out right now. So November is really the prime time. And since we're having this, if you've been outside today, it's hot, it's crazy. So they are probably still out today if you're in the right spot in Douglas County. We found them as far north as the Pawnee Grasslands in Weld County. I've been searching throughout Boulder, and I've not found them, but I think they should be here. If you find a good patch of sand dropseed, let me know, and go out in late October and November, and we'll take a look around. So I just wanted to highlight this. It's such a super cool species. Yeah, we had it published in the Journal of the Lepidopterous Society. I have a copy of that in the back if anybody wants to look. And you can also see it on iNaturalist. Now, into the butterflies. I thought for sure I'd see about 15 versions of this slide at this conference. But of course we have the Colorado Native Pollinating Insect Health Study that was published a few years ago. Many of the authors are here in the room. Thank you all. And then more recently, the State Wildlife Action Plan update, the 2025 update was published, including invertebrates. So again, we've got CPW folks in the room spread throughout here, so thank you all for your hard work. Folks took a look through all the butterflies, moths, all the different invertebrates, and tried to narrow it down to a concentrated list of those conservation targets. And they are broken into 3 tiers. The tier 1 are the rarest things, the things that are in need of more conservation effort. Tier 2s are maybe still rare, but perhaps there's some efforts underway to help these things, or Colorado's responsibility is less if they're more common in Utah, for instance. And then there are species that are in need of more information. So I'm going to go through a few of these examples today to introduce you to some of the species maybe you haven't heard about. First, I'll bring up some of the threatened and endangered species that we have. These are our 3 big ones. The Nokomis fritillary over here is the latest one that's been listed, I think probably just last year, 2024. And it's federally threatened. It's known from the west slope of Colorado, I want to say like Mesa and Delta counties, probably a couple other counties, and they are associated with springs, so wetlands in canyon lands on the Uncompahgre Plateau, up along the Colorado River, near Rifle, and probably elsewhere, but it's very poorly known in the state, mostly because the populations are likely mostly on private property. But the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, Forest Service, they're all working on now looking for this and trying to document it and understanding its populations in the state. In the middle, we have the Pawnee Montane skipper, which is quite famous in the state. This one was listed in the 1980s, and it lives in the South Platte River drainage near Deckers, so up in the foothills southwest of Denver. And it's a subspecies of a more widespread species, the Leonard skipper, but it is really the mountain-dwelling one. And that one has been studied for many years, especially in the association with large-scale wildfires down near Buffalo Creek. And then on the other side there, you're right, is the Uncompahgre Fritillary, which is a subspecies of the dingy fritillary. It's a lesser fritillary, and they live way up high on the tundra. And it's a very, very disjunct population. Some people think it's its own species. And again, the feds are monitoring these and making sure that they're healthy. A few other species that are now on the swap list as tier 1s because they're being petitioned, they're pending to be included in the federal endangered species list, are the large marble and the western Regal Fritillary. We have both of these in Colorado. The large marble is common in the foothills and the mountains, and the western Regal is quite a rarity out in the eastern plains. And this photo here is the one and only I've ever seen, and it was actually right down the street in Boulder. It just kind of flew along and landed on a milkweed, and I had my camera with me that day. It was very exciting. But since these are petitioned for listing, they automatically are on the tier 1 list. As is the migratory monarch, which is also petitioned for listing right now. And I had to include the monarch, our favorite. But these are all the ones maybe you're familiar with. Everybody knows the monarch. So now I'm going to jump into what you might not be familiar with. One of my favorites locally is the hops azure. It's I think that was Odell Brewery a couple years ago made the Celestrina IPA or ale or something, and I was lucky enough to buy one of those. And this is a species that is intricately tied with the western hops plant. So Humulus neomexicana. We of course have domesticated hops that grows in people's yards and around, but we have native hops. And you might look on the internet and the internet might tell you that's not true, but trust me, there's native hops here. And it grows in our drainages, and so we find the hops azure in foothills drainages. It was initially described from Jefferson, Boulder counties, but it's now been found to be quite widespread. It's found in Canada even, so Montana, Canada. And one question I have in my field work is how far south it goes, because I found individuals that look quite a lot like this species down in Los Animas County. But I didn't get a specimen, and it's kind of a question of if it's an eastern species or something from the southwest. But we kind of suspect that this species probably does go down the Front Range, even into New Mexico. It just has to be looked for in the right places. Here's an example of its habitat. This is some flood damage from the 2013 flood. This is in South Boulder at a place called Bull Gulch. And this type of disturbance is actually key for things like this butterfly because it opens things up so hops can grow. Hops loves to have a wide open, rocky, sunny place. So if that was formerly a drainage full of chokecherry, hawthorns, and probably some hops, but not a whole lot. So now it's been opened up, and I go out and walk this drainage a couple times a summer and record the butterflies. And one of the fun things I do is go to my favorite hops patch, and usually I'm there in June and I see the adults flying around, and then I go back in July and look for caterpillars because they're super cool. Let's see, I'm going to play this video. Some things to think about. I'm going to read this out loud. I tried to practice pronouncing these words because they're really great jargon here. The white invasive tubercles. Oh boy, I don't know if that was right. So reading about this, a lot of these lysanids, these gossamer winged butterflies, have a relationship with ants. And so usually they're providing the ants with a little sweet treat in exchange for some protection from predators or parasitoids. They also produce a pheromone that mimics the ants, basically like a juvenile's release. If there's something in the ant colony going after their young, the juvenile ants will release a pheromone, and so the caterpillar is mimicking that pheromone to get the ant to protect it. So let's watch this video. Caterpillar of a hops azure, Celestrini humulus, is being tended to by this ant, which is part of their life history. The ant protects the caterpillar from parasites and predators, and the caterpillar rewards the ant with some sweet secretions, honeydew. You can see the little white tubercles. Watching these ants, they just caress the rear of the caterpillar, kind of near those two white spots. I wonder if that's kind of the signal for the ant is asking the caterpillar to release some honeydew. This is the Asian ladybug, ladybird beetle, non-native species, but it came flying in, and I thought it must have been attracted to that pheromone lure, which is kind of cool to see, a little interaction. All right. So here in Boulder, we have an imperiled habitat that we love to celebrate, which is our xeric tallgrass prairie. Species like the big blue stem, little blue stem, yellow Indian grass. This is a great photo just demonstrating, this time of year, the fall colors are just wonderful. But as maybe you know, we only have about 4% of that ecosystem left in the world. We're lucky here in Boulder that we have rocky soils, which has protected some of these last remnant areas of the tallgrass prairie. And in the tallgrass prairie, we have several grass skippers that we conserve here. This is the prairie Argo skipper, a tier 1. The Otoe skipper. A lot of these are just kind of yellow skippers. They're really fast, but once you get into this stuff, they're so cool. And I wanted you to look I kind of put the host plants throughout the presentation kind of at the bottom. So these are all big blue stem feeders. This one here, the crossline skipper, is the species that I'm most worried about. Historically, it was reported to be common in Boulder. There are some field studies from the 1940s. Oh yeah, crossline skippers, they're at Chautauqua. They're all over the place. I've seen maybe 2 or 3, and I'm not really, I think that's what it is. They're hard to identify, but it seems to be almost gone. And then the western dusted skipper. This is one that actually, if you read the literature, they'll say, oh, it's found in Larimer County, it's found in Jefferson County, but not Boulder. But we've kind of learned more recently that's not true. They're throughout the foothills here in the right areas at the right time of year. And it could be that they've just been doing well and have, since the last person published about them, they've moved in. But again, all big blue stem feeders. A little case study here, we have a very tenacious invasive grass, the tall oak grass, which if you look out the window, you might be able to see it. It's that light golden color across the foothills. That's NCAR right behind us, and so all that light yellow is the tall oak grass. And I know we've got some of our open space staff here. We've been working very, very hard for many years to try to get rid of this grass, because it really is it's a cold season annual. It outcompetes a lot of the native grasses and forbs. This is another example of it, just growing underneath the forest. It's about waist high, and it produces a ton of seeds. And what we've been doing is trying to use strategic grazing. So we have areas near Shanahan and NCAR that are split into, I think we have about 6 different pastures fenced out, and so I'll rotate the cattle through. We also had the NCAR fire happened in, I think, 2021, right after the Marshall fire. It's kind of like, what is going on? Everything's burning. But we've been actually had this where this burn is. You see here, there are a lot of research plots. And so we actually have a pretty good idea of how the plants are responding to all this management. And I've been starting to go out to do a little pilot to say, hey, how are the pollinators doing? Over there, you can kind of see the fence corner here where this has been grazed and burned, and then you can see the tall oak grass on the other side. So that's just to kind of try to get a photo of showing that the grazing and treatments are working. And then this is all big blue stem growing up, right? It's basically right here. So we have a lot of that native grass coming in. And then we have things like monarchs. This is the Argos skipper. So these rare species that we want to see on the landscape are returning. So that's a nice story. We also have a lot of imperiled wetlands in the state. This is what we would like to see. This is a sedge wetland with lots of Nebraska sedge. But we've lost, across the nation over 50%, probably way more than that of our wetlands. And they've been converted. But there are a whole suite of rare species that exist in these wetlands that don't get a whole lot of attention. The smoky-eyed brown is one that I've never seen in Colorado. And it's known from just a few of the eastern counties. And then there are some populations that are, there were some in Larimer County, but now they're extirpated. And it's kind of one of those that's on the list, luckily, because it's basically, it could be gone from the state for all we know. The two-spotted skipper is a rare skipper that it comes to the very western edge of its range here in Boulder. And so we have a good population of it. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about some research we're doing with this species in a moment. Here's the Regal Fritillary again. It requires wetlands out in the eastern plains. The ones that we see in Boulder are usually, they're migrants, they're moving in. They're usually males who just are on the wing, flying around. And then this is called the Kohler's Fritillary, or the silver bordered fritillary, but this is a eastern plains subspecies, the Sabulocolus, which has a cool little story I'll go into. Just a little kind of back to management of our areas. On the left, we've got a nice field full of swamp milkweed. That's what we want to see. And on the right is, I don't know if you can tell, that's teasel. So that's just really what's happened recently in the last couple decades. We have things like teasel and other invasive species that are moving into wetlands and really degrading things, and likely the cause of some declines. We've talked and heard about chemical treatments and all sorts of other things. I just wanted to highlight the effectiveness of mowing and mechanical treatments. And so in Boulder, we use a lot of different strategies to address non-native plants and invasions, including mowing. And this is I just like this picture because it was an old-timey picture. This is how, and it just celebrating our traditional agricultural approach. A lot of the agriculture here in Boulder is just kind of an older way of doing things. We obviously don't mow all of our hayfields with this system, but just gives you an idea. We had some researchers come out to study the two-spotted skipper this year to do a rearing study. We were curious about what they're eating, how long does it take them to develop. Nobody knows anything about the eggs, caterpillars, or those earlier life stages. So we had a researcher from Utah come out, collected several females who he then elicited to lay eggs. And then he raised them, and we learned that, yes, they are. We generally think of them as eating Carex nebraskensis, the Nebraska sedge, which is common here, but it turns out they'll eat pretty much anything if it's green. And they have these really cool little nests up in the sedge or grass leaves, which is something I think about a lot, actually, with grazing, if they're getting munched on by cows, because they're aerial nests up in the grass. But they're doing well in our wetlands in South Boulder. Another video. Swamp milkweed, two-spotted skipper, just beautiful orange color with this white line along the base of the wing, which is distinctive. Yeah, windy. I'm already getting pulled off stage, so I got to hurry up. I got a lot to talk about. This is a little bit more about the Kohler's Fritillary. It's a cool story. If you read some of the journals about the species, it's basically the story goes like they used to know about a population in Timnath, and it got extirpated. It was destroyed somehow, development. And so it's been kind of this mystery of like, well, they're gone. That's too bad. But then there was a bioblitz that happened. I think back in 2010 up at the Soapstone Prairie Natural Area in the city of Fort Collins. And so we had some butterfly folks who said, let's take a look at the map. They saw some really nice wetlands out there, a place called Brannigan Springs, and they went out and found that, they're still there. They're using this beautiful, the northern bog violet as their host plant, which is actually the same plant that the Regal Fritillary uses. So they haven't found Regal Fritillaries at this site, but at least this grassland species is holding on. And then just a kind of anecdotal note being out in the field there is that the cattle create these hummocks in this wetland. So it's this kind of swale, and there are these hummocks of raised dirt and mud, and that's where the violets are growing, or on the hummocks. And so it's actually important to have that disturbance of cattle tromping through that to create that habitat for the violet and then the butterfly. So, say a butterfly, think a cow, or a horse, or a bison, or elk, or ancient camel, whatever. And that's Ferdinand. I just had to say, oh, Ferdinand and his butterflies. I'm now going to switch gears to talk about a different type of habitat and a different group of species that are kind of what I call the edge species, and they're all associated with the canyon countries. And this is not just on the west slope, this is Colorado National Monument, but also on the south slope. So we have the Raton Mesa and all the canyon country in Baca County, Los Animas County, along the New Mexico and Oklahoma borders. That is my son there, little guy. Actually, you can't tell, but that's a butterfly hat. So if you look closely, there's a bunch of bugs on there. This is the minor swallowtail. We have the Indra swallowtail here in the foothills, but this is the subspecies on the west slope, which is slightly different and is now a tier 2 species of greatest conservation need. And they just are they represent the wild canyon countries. They're like the butterfly. If you're ever out in the canyons, it's like you have golden eagles or white-throated swifts and canyon wrens. Well, if you're out on the west slope of Colorado, the minor swallowtail is kind of that representative. They fly around the tops of the rimrock canyons just below the summit on these cliffy areas, and they're hard to see and hard to get close up to. And I'm glad that that's getting some attention in the swap. This is the desert elfin, which is another one that was known from western Colorado, but very poorly. And some bird researchers with Bird Conservancy of the Rockies were out doing some pinyon jay research out in Mesa County in Colorado National Monument, and they located the desert elfin a couple years ago, and so I followed up, I think last year, and went out there to photograph them. You could see an egg here, watched it lay the egg right in the little twig. And elfins are a group of butterflies that emerge very, very early in the season. So this is in April. And they use a single plant, the Stansbury's cliff rose. And so if you find the plant in the right type of aspect and area, then you can find this elfin. This is a really cool species, and it just barely comes into Colorado. It was discovered, first collected in 1959 outside of Albuquerque, which to me is kind of crazy that you have a major city and this butterfly that is beautiful and distinct is right there. So it was officially described the Sandia hair streak in 1960. It uses a single plant. The plant is actually, the taxonomy is a little confusing, but the Nolina, the bear grass, and so it lays its eggs on the Nolina flowers, this is the inflorescence coming in over here, not quite in bloom. And so Dina Clark, a CU herbarium botanist, did a big study of the floristics of the Mesa de Maya region, and she discovered the Nolina down there. And so then Paul Oppler at CSU said, oh, well, if Nolina's in Colorado, maybe the butterfly's there. So I think at some point in the 90s, he went down and did discover that the Sandia hair streak is there. I happen to be friends with the Boulder County botanist who grew up in Branson, Colorado down there, and her uncle is the ranch manager of the Spool Ranch where this butterfly lives. So I said, hey, Kelsey, can you give me your uncle's phone number? And I went down there and photographed it a few years ago. So they're still there. I found them in one exact spot, which is exactly where Paul found them. I searched acres and acres, like hundreds of acres, found no more. They were just right in this one spot. There are probably more out there, but that day. But this is just barely coming into the state. Another that until this morning I was like, oh yeah, they're just barely in the state. This is the soapberry hair streak. It's actually the only member of the genus, Phaeostrymon, and it's a hair streak, and they live on soapberry trees, the western soapberry. Dave Leatherman, maybe some of you know, he's a birder entomologist from CSU, retired. He spent a lot of time in Lamar, and there's a soapberry tree, and he was out there this summer and found a soapberry hair streak in Lamar, which is like 50 miles further north than any other records. So you have folks out there like Dave and anybody in this room out there with your camera, you can help us kind of get a better idea of the distribution of these things. All right, perfect. I have 3 minutes or so, 2 minutes. All right, now I'm gonna depress you all. I'm gonna set this up for Nick because this is kind of a sad story. No offense, Nick, I know. But the Sacramento Mountains checker spot does not exist in Colorado. It's endemic to the Sacramento Mountains of southern New Mexico. So you go south of Albuquerque, and it's a little sky island down there. There are lots of different endemic species, including this checker spot. So this is the Sacramento Mountains checker spot here on the left, and this is the Capella checker spot, which we have here in the Front Range. They're extremely similar. They have similar life history. They all eat penstemons. The problem is that the Sacramento Mountains checker spot was petitioned for listing in the 1990s. It was not listed. Finally, the Forest Service continued to do monitoring. Populations going down, 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 down. Finally, January 2023, I think, it was listed. Yeah, January 2023. Well, guess what? None have been seen since it's been listed. It has not been seen in nature. It's already gone. But there's hope because the folks in New Mexico have captive individuals. They have one caterpillar left, a single individual. I touched base with them earlier this week as I got prepared. It's still alive. That individual caterpillar is going on its 4th winter. It's basically, they go into diapause throughout the winter. And this is a species that is adapted to an arid climate, so they're able to go into multi-year diapause, which is good. Maybe that's a strategy that's going to help them. My hope is that there's somewhere underground, out in the wild, in diapause, because it's just been dry, and they're hanging out underground, and then hopefully we'll get the right conditions, and they'll reappear. If not, they asked me, hey, do you ever find eggs of the Capella? And I said, well, no, but I'll look. And so actually, Lindsay is here. She's in the back. We were out on Flagstaff Mountain this summer looking at butterflies. And I was kind of like getting these emails about this. And I said, well, let's look around. And I basically found some penstemon. I took a look, and there were hundreds of eggs all over this one penstemon I found. So I collected the plant. I just pulled it up, stuck it in a plastic bag, put all the egg clusters into little vials and shipped them overnight down to New Mexico. And so those individuals are now larvae, and they're all going to diapause right now. They're in the refrigerator. So they have lots and lots of Capella caterpillars. The hope is in the spring, the Cloudcroftii, the Sacramento Mountains checker spot caterpillar, will eclose. We'll get some Capellas to eclose, and they can make some hybrids, and which is a last-ditch effort, the whole ARC kind of thing. So I'm really hoping they're out there in nature. They'll reappear when there's some good rains, but we'll see. And that's it. Thank you.
I think I can speak for all of us by saying thanks for sharing your expertise and all your beautiful photographs. I don't think he mentioned what a great photographer he was, right? And so the opportunity to get to know some of our species. We can take a couple of questions if folks got questions.
Hi, so I have a really quick question. I'm just really curious, not knowing that much about butterflies or skippers. You showed us a lot of different skipper species and butterflies that are endangered. What percentage are there that are endangered versus is there an abundant ones that are doing okay? Or can you give us perspective?
Absolutely. No, that's a great question. We have over 280 species of butterfly in the state. I had to pick and choose carefully here for this talk because I didn't even get to the mountains, right? It was a lot of plains and canyons. I would say that we are fortunate to have fairly healthy populations of butterflies in the state. There are just a few that I'm quite worried about, like the cross-line skipper, which is living in that remnant habitat that we know is very endangered. We're losing it all the time. Various threats from invasive plants to development. But I would say the state of Colorado's butterflies is generally rosy. It's looking pretty good. I'm an optimist, perhaps maybe too much, but then talking, we heard talks yesterday about how common species are really the ones that are declining. And here I'm focusing on these kind of rare tertiary things, the edge species that are just like, you really got to try hard to go see them at all. And getting like a population estimate on what they're doing is very difficult. So for me, sometimes I go backtrack, I go through some of the historic records, talk to the right person, find the right spot just to see it. And then, but to go back and get year after year, how are they doing is really difficult. And that's part of the challenge for the state, is really to try to start thinking about how they're going to get a handle on all this for not just butterflies, but all the different invertebrates. So.
Yeah. I'm looking at the picture behind you.
Yeah.
It looks like it's a recent burn area. In general, is a cleared space like that after a burn a better habitat for butterflies?
Thank you so much. Yeah, I put this in specifically because this is the, it's called the Flagstaff Fire. It's Bear Peak, West Ridge, if you're ever up on the mountains right behind us. This burned in 2012, and it is an epic butterfly spot. Oh, it is just thriving, and there are tons of the Capella checker spot up there. If you go up there in June, you'll see dozens of the orange Capellas flying around. I wouldn't say there's a ton of penstemon, but a lot of butterflies love hilltops and ridges for mate locating behaviors. But you have things like Ceanothus growing up there, which is a great food plant for many different species and a great nectar resource, and just lots of flower nectar resources. And I put this here because of the Sacramento Mountain checker spot. Part of its problem is fire suppression. A century of fire suppression in New Mexico, it makes sense logically, but they need more fires. And it would be helpful. I think they've had fires there too. They're out there, but this species I've noticed does respond very, very well to fire.
Awesome. How about another big round of applause for Chris?
All right, thank you.